On the afternoon, my brother-in-law put his big hand on my shoulder and told me a real man knows how to forgive. I'd already had the papers locked in the toolbox of my truck for 9 days. He just couldn't see it yet. None of them could. They were about to. My name is Russell Hayes. I'm 64 years old, and I want to tell you straight off that I never went hunting for what I found. I wasn't the suspicious type. I was the type who, after 38 years of marriage, still left a sticky note on the coffee pot when I headed to the shop early. The truth didn't come to me because I was clever. It came to me because it was January, and in January I do the books. That's how it started. Not with a phone. Not with lipstick on a collar like in some old movie. It started with a spreadsheet at my own kitchen table. Second week of the new year, a mug of Sanka going cold next to my reading glasses, while a Lions postseason game I'd already given up on murmured in the other room. Let me back up a little, because you need to understand what I had before I tell you how I lost it. For 31 years I owned a custom millwork shop just outside Grand Rapids, Michigan. Cabinetry, built-ins, the kind of staircases that make people stop on the landing and run their hand along the rail without thinking. Me and my partner started it in a rented pole barn in 1994 with 2 table saws and a line of credit my father co-signed against his better judgment. My partner. I'm going to keep calling him that because the other words I have for him aren't fit for a story your grandmother might be listening to. We met in shop class at 17. He was the best man at my wedding. He cried at it. Stood up there in a rented tux and told the whole room he'd never seen 2 people fit together better in his life. 40-some years I called that man my best friend. The shop did well. Well enough that 4 years back we opened a second showroom up in Traverse City, riding all that resort and second home money along the bay. Somebody had to run point up there during the build-out and the first big contracts, and that somebody was me. I was the one with the truck and the bad back and no excuse, since our kids were grown and my wife had her own routines. So I drove the 2.5 hours up US 31 every week, sometimes staying 4 or 5 nights at a stretch in a Hampton Inn that smelled like chlorine and burnt coffee. My partner stayed home in Grand Rapids, running the main shop, keeping the lights on. Or so I believed. While I was up north building the future for both of us, the 2 of them were back home building something else, and they were paying for it with money I helped earn. So, January, the books. I reconcile the company card every year before the accountant comes. I've done it the same way since the Clinton administration. And that January, sitting there in my reading glasses, I started seeing charges that didn't sit right. A boutique hotel out in Saugatuck, a place couples go for anniversaries 80-some miles from any job we had, $200. Then again the next month. Then again. Always tag client lodging in the memo line. We didn't have a single client in Saugatuck. I know our client list the way I know my own kids' birthdays. I want to tell you I felt rage in that moment. I didn't. What I felt was a kind of slow, cold curiosity, the way you feel when you smell smoke but haven't found the fire yet. I pulled 12 months of statements. Then I pulled the shop calendar, the one we shared, and I lined the dates up. Every one of those hotel charges landed on a day my partner had blocked off as vendor visit or install off-site. And every single one of those days I'd been up in Traverse City, 2.5 hours away, building the future. Then I found the jeweler. A store in downtown Holland, $400, the Saturday before our own wedding anniversary. The same weekend my wife told me she was going to a quilting retreat near the lake with the girls from church. I never got jewelry that anniversary. I got a card and a tie. I'm a careful man. I didn't go upstairs and start yelling. I poured the Sanka down the sink, made a real pot of coffee, and I sat back down. We share an old iPad in the kitchen, the one she uses for recipes and her sister's Facebook and the grandkids' photos. It's signed into her account. I'd never once looked at it in 15 years. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I picked it up off the counter, and the messages were right there, mirrored over from her phone like they'd been waiting for me the whole time. I read for 2 hours. I didn't move. The dog came and put his head on my knee and I didn't move. I read 4 years of it. 4 years. Not a slip. Not a weak moment at a Christmas party. 4 years of 2 people I trusted with everything, calling it love in a thread that ran right up through that same afternoon, while I was up north eating gas station sandwiches and FaceTiming my wife to say goodnight, and she was texting him before my call had even dropped. If you've ever had your whole life rearrange itself between one breath and the next, you know there's a strange quiet that comes after. Not peace. The quiet before a storm front, when the birds stop and the pressure drops, and the sky turns that green color. That's where I lived for the next 3 weeks. Welcome to Dad's Bold Revenge. Get comfortable, because this one goes somewhere, and I'm not going to rush it. Tell me down in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Hit that like button. Stick with me. You're going to want to see how this ends. I didn't say a word. Not for 3 weeks. People think a man in my spot either flips the table or falls apart on the kitchen floor. I did neither. I got up the next morning, made her coffee the way I always did, 2 sugars, splash of half and half, and I set it by her elbow while she scrolled that same iPad. She thanked me. Asked if I wanted meatloaf or the chicken thing for supper. I said the chicken thing. She smiled at me. I smiled back. That was the last ordinary morning of our marriage, and only one of us knew it. What I felt those 3 weeks wasn't anger. It was grief, the bone-deep kind, the kind you feel standing over a casket. Except the person I was grieving was still alive, still moving around my house in her robe, still humming in the kitchen, still sleeping on her side of the bed 18 inches from me, breathing easy. Every supper I'd watch her across the table and think, this woman looked into a phone screen every night I was gone and told me she missed me, and never once flinched. Every time she kissed my cheek heading out the door, I thought, she's probably texting him from the driveway. I gave myself 20 minutes a night. After she fell asleep, I'd go out to the shop. The little wood shop I keep behind the garage, separate from the business, turn on the one light over the bench, and just stand there with my hands on a piece of walnut I'd been meaning to make into a clock for 2 years. 20 minutes. I let myself feel all of it out there where the sawdust could soak it up. The humiliation. The 40 years of him. The 38 years of her. The math of all the weekends. Then I'd shut the light off and go back inside because I had work to do, and you can't do good work with your hands shaking. 3 weeks of normal breakfasts. 3 weeks of normal good nights. And the whole time I was moving like a man with a blueprint nobody else could see. Then she sat me down. A Sunday night, end of February. There was a Red Wings game on and she turned it off, which is how I knew. She had her hands folded in her lap, and her eyes were already wet before she said a single word, and I thought, well, there it is. She'd rehearsed this, she'd decided how it was going to go, and she'd cast me in the role of the man who breaks down and then, eventually, forgives. There's something I have to tell you, she said, and I need you to just listen before you react. All right, I said. She told me about the affair. She called it a mistake. A terrible mistake she'd gotten tangled up in and couldn't find her way out of. A mistake. 4 years isn't a mistake. A mistake is backing into the mailbox. A mistake is salting the walk and forgetting the front step. 4 years is a decision, made fresh every single morning over coffee, made by 2 grown adults who knew exactly what they were doing and chose to keep on doing it, while I drove up and down US 31 with the heat broken in my truck. But I let her talk. Then she got to the real reason, and I knew there had to be one. Because guilt doesn't pick a Sunday in February. She told me the two of them were thinking about a future. That he'd been after her to finally come clean. That she didn't want me to find out some other way, from some statement or some rumor, and have it be ugly. And here it came. She hoped, given our age, given the 38 years, given the grandkids, that we could be civilized. That I might let her keep the house, that we could split things fair without the lawyers turning it into a war. She'd already been to look at a condo, down in Florida, near Naples. She let that slip and then tried to walk it back, and that's how I knew the calendar was running out on her. There was a closing date somewhere, that's why February. Not conscience. A deposit. How long? I asked. She blinked. What? How long has it been? The two of you, not the version you rehearsed, the real number. She looked down at her hands. A long pause. Just long enough to tell me she'd hoped I would never ask that exact question. Since around when the second shop opened, she said, almost a whisper. 4 years. I'd done the arithmetic already off the iPad, but hearing her say it out loud landed different. 4 years she'd kissed me goodbye at the door. 4 years she'd sat at Thanksgiving across from my partner and passed him the gravy and asked after his garden. 4 years she'd FaceTimed me up north with that same soft face and asked how the install went. Knowing. I nodded. Slow. I let the quiet sit there between us a good long while, long enough that she started to shift on the couch. Okay, I said finally. I need some time to think about who I want to be in all this, Russell. Her voice cracked, hopeful. She thought she'd heard the door to forgiveness creak open. She had it exactly backwards. I'm not yelling, I said. I just need some time. She cried harder, and she mistook my calm for the beginning of mercy. She was wrong. I wasn't deciding anything. I'd decided everything 9 days before she ever turned off that hockey game. 4 days after that, her family came, all of them, like a delegation. My mother-in-law, 81, sharp as a fishhook and twice as quick to set it. My brother-in-law, who played one season of D2 ball 40 years ago and has been living off it ever since, the kind of man who fills a doorway and a silence both. And my wife's aunt, who nobody invited but who has never in her life missed a family crisis and wasn't about to break that record. They came through my front door and arranged themselves in my living room like a parole board. My mother-in-law went first, hands folded. Russell, you're a good man, everyone knows it. This is a painful thing, nobody's saying otherwise. But you're not young, sweetheart, neither one of you is. 38 years. That's not something you set down over a rough patch. A rough patch. I almost smiled. My brother-in-law couldn't sit still for the soft approach. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and gave me the linebacker eyes. Look, Russ, I'm gonna be straight with you, 'cause we go back. You stay, you work it out, you're the bigger man. Everybody respects that. People say, there's a guy who held his family together when it counted, but you walk? You're just another old man who couldn't take the heat and bailed. That's your legacy, brother. That's what they put on the stone. He said it like he was throwing me a rope, like he'd solved the whole thing by driving over. I looked at him. I looked at my mother-in-law with her folded hands. I looked at the aunt, who at that exact moment was helping herself to my mixed nuts off the side table, without asking, working the cashews out of the dish like a raccoon at a campsite, and who in 15 years of holidays had never once gotten my name right on the first try. But sure, make yourself at home. Those are the good ones from Costco. I want you to hear me on something, because this is the part that locked it for me. If I'd folded right then, if I'd said, okay, let's go to counseling, let's be civilized, I knew exactly what this same family would do 6 months down the road. The very same people telling me to be the bigger man would be the ones, the first time I brought it up in an argument, looking at me sideways and saying, Russell, that's in the past, you said you forgave her, let it go. They'd hand me the wound and then bill me for keeping it. I'd seen it done to other men. I wasn't going to volunteer for it. So I took a slow breath and I looked my brother-in-law dead in the eye. You know what? I said quietly. You're right. I really do need to think hard about what kind of man I want to be here. He nodded, satisfied, shoulders dropping like he'd closed a sale. My mother-in-law exhaled. Even the aunt paused her chewing out of respect. The whole room relaxed. And sitting right there, with that family looking proud of themselves on my own furniture, I want to tell you what not one of them knew. Not my mother-in-law with her folded hands. Not my brother-in-law with his stone and legacy speech. Not the aunt with her cashew dust. None of them knew that I'd already sat across the desk from the most thorough divorce attorney in Kent County, not once but twice. That the papers weren't just drafted, they were ready to file. That in the locked toolbox of my truck, parked right there in the driveway 40 feet away, was a folder with color-coded tabs holding 11 years of company card abuse that would make any judge in Michigan sit up straight. They thought they were talking to a man standing at a crossroads, weighing his options. They were talking to a man who'd already crossed, signed, and was just deciding which day to let them feel the ground move. If you've stuck with me this far, do me a small favor. Hit subscribe, tap that like, and tell me in the comments what you'd have done sitting in that living room. Now let me take you back into those 3 quiet weeks, because while my wife was making meatloaf, and my brother-in-law was rehearsing his legacy speech, and the aunt was no doubt scouting which of my snacks she'd raid next, I was busy. Quietly, carefully, the way I build a staircase. Day 4 after I found it, I called a family law attorney downtown. A woman named Margaret Doyle came recommended by a fellow at my church who'd been through it. She had the look of someone who'd heard every lie a marriage can produce and stopped being surprised by any of it around 1998. I sat across her desk and laid it out flat. She didn't gasp. She didn't do the sympathetic head tilt or push a box of tissues at me. She picked up a pen and a yellow legal pad and asked questions. How long ago did you find it? 4 days. Have you confronted her? No. She looked at me over her glasses. Have you told a single living soul? No. She set the pen down flat. Good. Stop talking and start documenting. Today I liked her immediately. She walked me through it. Michigan's an equitable distribution state. Assets split fair, not necessarily even. She told me to pull 38 years of records, bank statements, the 401(n), the IRAs, the deed, the home equity line, everything. Then she leaned in and said, now, you mentioned a business, a partnership. I need every page of that. Every contract, every agreement, Every clause either of you ever put your name to. She didn't know it yet, but that was the most important sentence anyone spoke in that office. Because the divorce was the small game. The business was the real one. The two of us built that shop from a rented pole barn. Real revenue, a fat client list, a second showroom up north, already beating its first-year numbers. We built it together, I'll give him that. But I'm the one who kept the books. 31 years, I knew every contract, every clause, every dollar that came in or went out. So when I went back through the company records with the slow, patient focus of a man who's got nothing left to lose, I found the rest of it. Not just the hotels, gifts, dinners at places we never took clients, a jeweler, a weekend charter on Lake Michigan, billed as a site consultation. 11 years of it, going back well before I ever thought the affair did, which told me something about my partner I'll let you sit with. Always tagged under client entertainment, all on the company card, all while I was somewhere else holding up my end. I printed every page. I built it into a folder with tab dividers, color-coded by year, the way I'd prep a job estimate for a finicky architect. I labeled it expense audit, because that read cleaner and landed quieter than the truer word, which was evidence. 41 documented charges. Everyone on company money, everyone mine to use now. Here's the thing nobody remembers about the day you start a business with your best friend. Back in 1994, before the first board got cut, my dad made us sit down with a tight-fisted old business lawyer named Hal Brennan to draw up a real partnership agreement. We grumbled the whole time. Two kids who wanted to make sawdust, not paperwork. Hal was thorough to the point of being a pain. And buried in there, in a section neither of us had read since the Berlin Wall came down, was a clause Hal had insisted on. The kind of clause young men sign and never think about again. It said, in plain enough English, that if either partner used company assets, funds, or time for personal conduct amounting to a breach of fiduciary duty, the other partner could trigger immediate dissolution and take primary rights to the client contracts, the intellectual property, and the operating assets. Hal Brennan, wherever you are, the man earned a steak dinner he'll never get to collect. Margaret read the clause twice. Then she took her glasses all the way off and set them down. Russell, she said, the card charges alone are misuse of company assets. Stack the calendar on top of that. 41 documented charges, I said. She looked at me a long moment across that desk. You have been very busy. I just smiled. I sent my partner the dissolution notice on a Thursday morning in March. Certified mail to the shop and to his house at the same hour, with Margaret sending the formal legal notice in the same window. So there was no gap, no phone call that could muddy it. I didn't call him first, didn't text, didn't drive over and give him the satisfaction of a confrontation where he'd get to explain himself and I'd have to stand there and take it. No speech, no closure. Just a clean legal document landing in his mailbox on an ordinary Thursday like a tree coming down across the road behind you after you've already passed. He called 6 times that day. I watched the phone light up on the bench and went back to sanding. The 7th was a text. Russ, come on, 40 years. Don't torch everything we built over this. Call me. Everything we built. Over this. I read it twice, set the phone face down, and went back to my walnut. That was the last thing I ever let him say to me. Not because I was too furious to answer, because some men don't deserve the dignity of your reaction. Under the dissolution terms, I walked off with the whole thing. The trade name, the brand, every drawing and template and shop standard we'd ever developed. The client list, which was something close to 3/4 of the annual revenue, because those people had always been mine. I'm the one who answered the Sunday calls. I'm the one who drove back down from Traverse City through a snowstorm once, because a countertop template was a half-inch off, and a customer's daughter's wedding shower was the next weekend. I kept the lease on the main shop, and I kept my people. My lead installer called me the morning after the notice went out and said 4 words. Please tell me you're rebuilding. My shop foreman, who'd watched the whole thing from his bench without a word, said yes before I even finished the question. And what did my partner get? The Saugatuck Hotel rewards points, I suppose. He got the satisfaction of the affair, which from what I hear curdled fast. He got the lake charter memories. He got nothing of the company that mattered, because the company was never the sign out front. It was the trust. And he'd spent that years ago, $200 at a time, on rooms with a view. Now the family. This is the part people picture wrong. They imagine a screaming match, a Thanksgiving table flipped, somebody filming it for the internet. That's not what I did, because that's loud and loud is temporary. What I did was quiet and permanent. Over about 2 weeks, I reached out to the family one at a time. Not as a group. Coffee, just the two of us, before the divorce hit the public record, and they heard everything secondhand and garbled. Every one of them said yes, because they all still figured they were coming to talk me down off the ledge. My mother-in-law first. A diner on Plainfield, a Tuesday morning. I got there early, ordered us both coffee, and I had the folder face down on the table when she sat. I slid it across without a word and let her read. She read for a long time. Then she looked up, and her face had changed. "What is this, Russell?" "I've marked the dates," I said. I turned to page gentle, the way you'd turn one for a kid. "This weekend right here." "That's the one she told you she was up at the lake with the quilting group. You texted me that Saturday to ask if she got there safe. You remember." My mother-in-law went very still. She was at a hotel in Saugatuck. With him. I turned another page. "And this, last spring. She borrowed $300 off you for the dog's surgery." Her jaw tightened, just barely. "The dog never had surgery. That charge is from a jeweler in Holland. A men's watch. I don't own a watch like that." I closed the folder and slid it back across the formica. "I'm not showing you this to turn you against your own daughter," I said. "She's your girl. She always will be. But you sat in my living room and told me to accept it and be the bigger man. I just thought you ought to know the whole shape of the thing before you decided that was your position." She didn't touch her coffee. She didn't say much of anything. She didn't need to. My brother-in-law was a different animal. He wanted to argue it, which was on brand. "Look, I'm not saying what she did was right." "Good," I said. "But marriage is complicated. People make mistakes under pressure. And at your age," I set the folder on the table between us. "I'm not here to debate you. I'm here to hand you information. Do whatever you want with it." He opened it. Got maybe 4 pages in. Stopped. Something moved behind his eyes that I'd never seen there before, this big confident man. And it was the look of a guy realizing he gave a speech without reading the script. "You told me," I said quiet, "that if I left, I'd be just another man who couldn't take the heat and walked out on his family. I need you to look at those pages and tell me who actually walked out on this family. Take your time." He didn't say a word. I stood, dropped a 5 on the table for my coffee, and told him I didn't need an apology. I just needed him to have the truth in his hands. Then I left him sitting there with it. The aunt got a phone call. I wasn't about to buy a 3rd cup of coffee for a woman who couldn't remember my name without checking my wife's face first and ate her way through my Costco nuts like it was a buffet. I gave her the short version, clean and quick. She gasped in all the right spots and said, "Lord have mercy," 4 separate times in about 6 minutes. And honestly, it was the most productive conversation she and I ever had. Then I stepped back and let the truth do what truth does when it finally gets loose in a room full of people who'd been working off half a story. Within 2 weeks, my wife had quit calling me and started calling her mother instead. Over and over, from what I gathered, frantic, because the fortress she'd been counting on had turned into a house full of people holding receipts she couldn't explain. The story she'd kept airtight for 4 years was leaking from every seam, and I wasn't anywhere near it. Not in the room, not on the phone, not in the same county most days. I was at the shop, building. The divorce came through that fall, equitable like Margaret promised. I kept the house. Turned out 38 years of me handling the money meant I knew exactly where every dollar sat. And civilized works against the person who assumed nobody was paying attention. I called Margaret to thank her when it was done. "You were a good client, Russell," she said. "Organized. Patient. You did your homework." A pause. "Don't ever come back, God willing," I said. She laughed, and it was the first time in a year of working together I'd heard her do it. "There's a piece I haven't told you yet, and it's the one I care about most." At the shop we had a young man, 23, an apprentice I'd taken on 2 winters back, when he came in with calluses and no high school diploma, and a way of looking at a joint that you can't teach. When everything blew up, that kid had nothing to do with any of it, and the only thing he was scared of was losing his bench. The day I launched the new company, he was the first name I wrote down. I want to be clear about him the way I want to be clear about anything in this whole sorry business. He was innocent. He never picked a side because he never needed to. He just wanted to learn to build things right, and I'll be damned if the wreckage 2 old men made was going to cost that boy his start. I opened the new shop under my own name. Just mine on the sign, clean, no partner, no company card for anybody else to bleed. I launched with the bulk of the old clients, who came over without a second of hesitation, because their loyalty was to the man who answered the phone, not to a name on a truck. My foreman came, my installer came. The kid came, and within 3 months I'd hired two more, and we had more work backed up than we could touch. People ask if the two of them stayed together. From what filters back to me, and I promise you I don't go looking. They did for a while, technically. And here's the part that answers the question I know some of you have been chewing on this whole time. Why, if she loved him, did she fight so hard to keep me? Why not just walk out the front door into his arms? Because he never actually opened them. For all his texting about a future, the man never once offered her a real one. He liked the affair exactly the way it was. The secret, the stolen weekends, the thrill of getting away with it on my dime. She knew that somewhere. So she wasn't choosing him over me. She was trying to keep me as the soft place to land while she kept him as the excitement. Because at 61, the idea of having neither scared her more than anything. The folder didn't just end my marriage. It ended her arrangement. Once the secret was out in the light, there was nothing left between the two of them but two people at a breakfast table who knew exactly what the other one was capable of and had to look at it every single morning. The electricity was the secret. Take the secret away and you're just two people who hurt a lot of folks to get a thing that wasn't even there. My mother-in-law called me on a Friday evening in October. I almost didn't pick up. I was in my kitchen, of all things, building a clock out of that walnut I'd been carrying around for 2 years, because apparently one of the things that happens to a man on the far side of all this is he finally finishes the projects he started. Russell, hello. A long pause, the kind that costs something to break. I owe you an apology. You don't, no. Firm. Decided. I do. I sat in your living room and told you to swallow a thing I didn't understand. I made up my mind without the truth, and you deserve better than that from me. I've been sick about it. I showed you the folder because I thought you should have the whole picture, I said. Not to cause you pain, not to turn you against her. Just because you'd earned the truth after 38 years. I know that now, she said, quiet. We talked a few more minutes. Nothing heavy. She asked about the new shop. I asked about her health, which wasn't good. When we hung up, I sat there a while in my own kitchen with the clock parts spread out on a towel, and I realized I didn't hate my wife. I really didn't. What she did was a wound I'll carry to the end. But carrying a grudge on top of it, hauling that weight around for whatever years I've got left, that's her load now, not mine. I set mine down a long time ago, somewhere between the shop bench and the 20-minute timer. The first morning I woke up alone in a quiet house and noticed the quiet didn't feel like loss anymore. It just felt like mine. Here's what I want you to take with you. They told me to accept it and move on, and you know what? They weren't all the way wrong. They just didn't understand the words they were using. Acceptance isn't the same as surrender. Moving on isn't the same as lying down. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do, especially an old man everyone's already decided is too tired to make a fuss, is refuse to perform his own funeral. Refuse to yell. Refuse to beg. Refuse to shrink down into the smaller, easier version of himself that everybody else finds more convenient to manage. You go quiet, and you go to work. She got her fresh start. He got every consequence he charged to that card, one hotel room at a time. My brother-in-law got a lesson about the assumptions he makes about men he never bothered to read. My mother-in-law got the truth she'd earned. And I got my life back, and then I built it into something better than the one they all told me to be grateful for. If this story meant something to you tonight, hit that like button and subscribe for more real, raw stories from men who decided not to go quietly. I'll see you on the next one.